travelers, welcome to Life Between Flights, the podcast about travel industry, owning your own business, and everything in between. I'm going to start out this episode by saying that this whole thing is about your life and the interruptions in life. And literally, as I was sitting down to record tonight, I got a call from my husband saying that my daughter was refusing to eat dinner unless I came and met them and ate dinner with them. So after a 45-minute delay and also having to drive in about 5 inches of snow to get there and back, finally recording tonight. So let's dive into our very first actual episode of Life Between Flights. This one's really going to be about, when you're thinking about starting a business, where to even begin. And this, of course, applies to the travel industry and becoming a travel advisor, but also really anyone that's looking to start a small business or even looking for, kind of career advice or things like that. So for me, when I started my travel business, I really had no idea. I did zero market research. I had no idea what I was doing. I had just read a book about how to become a travel advisor. And obviously I had been booking travel for myself and for a few others, but I hadn't really thought at all about the business, setting goals, what the income would be, how much I would be spending on the business before I was even making money, all of those things. And so I kind of want to go down kind of the basics of all of those things to think about when you're first starting out, before you've come up with your business name, before you've even come up with like really what you're going to do, whether it's a travel advisor or something else. Some of the things that I would definitely start out with is if you're looking to start a business, check out the Small Business Administration, which is sba.gov. I will link it in the show notes. But they have a business guide, and basically they have a whole bunch of resources for those first couple very important steps you should take when you're going to be starting a business. Obviously for me, I knew from doing kind of my own, thoughts in my head, talking to myself, that I really wanted to become a travel advisor. And for me, that was the direction that I wanted to go. But for those of you that maybe don't have that real defined thought as to what you want to do, there's so many websites out there about finding your purpose, finding your passion in life. I will have guests later on who are going to be talking about that, or about how to find joy in what you're doing, regardless if that's working in corporate, if that's working retail or whatever, finding those pieces of joy in whatever you're doing. But hopefully you're finding things that play to your strengths and the things that will challenge you to keep learning and keep growing, because I think that's where a lot of us find our passion and enjoyment, and it's really what's going to make it worth it at the end of the day, even on the most stressful of days. So I will link the Small Business Administration, but one of the websites that I was looking at about finding your purpose, or just kind of like figuring out where your interests lie, I will link this as well, markmanson.net. He talks a lot about not finding your purpose. That isn't his thing, but he does have some resources just to kind of think about, where your interests lie, where your passions lie. What would you want to do day in, day out, regardless of what the money looks like, regardless of what challenges you face on a daily basis? What are all of those things that you want to be doing day to day that you would at least tolerate? There are definitely moments being a travel advisor, or even in my librarian life, where it's a challenging day and it's hard and you're not getting the recognition, or you're not accomplishing what you thought you were going to accomplish that day or whatever. There's always going to be challenges, and it's like, are those challenges worth tolerating, or are they challenges enough that you can't tolerate it and you need to find something else? That is especially something now in the approaching the, my midlife. I always joked with my grandfather growing up that I was going to live to be 100. So I'm almost to that midlife point. But I think it's just finding what interests you enough that you can tolerate it, even on those bad days, even when you're not accomplishing all the things on the to-do list, or you're having challenges, or people are just kind of stealing the joy in that day. What's going to make you get up the next morning and be okay with all of that, because it's rewarding in the long run. So if you kind of have an idea of where you would like to start, or at least the industry, I would certainly recommend doing some market research. I do know there are business librarians out there in the world. 2 of them are very great friends of mine. And I highly recommend, if you truly have no idea where to start, there are plenty of free resources out there. The small business administrations, there's small business chapters all over the country that they do free workshops and trying to help you decide, you want to start a business, but what does that mean? What kind of business do you want to start? Just kind of starting to do that research and see what's going to be the most interesting to you and what's going to be, where do your skills lie? So that's the number one, unless you know specifically what you want to do. That makes it a little bit easier. And then in a future episode, I'm going to talk about, for me, my first step was joining my host agency. That was the first thing out of the gate that I did. But we will talk about host agencies and all of that stuff in another episode. So once you've kind of conducted your market research, and whether that's looking at in your region, is there something in your region that's missing? Like, I am part of several Facebook groups for my community, and I see people all the time saying, why don't we have blah, blah, blah? Why don't we have, I'm trying to think of what the latest one was. It was kind of like a Topgolf, like virtual golf thing, because there are a lot of golfers in this community, and they're like, why don't we have a virtual one? Well, funnily enough, we have one opening up. If it's not open now, it'll be opening up soon. But obviously there's an interest in that. And some people thought, hey, there's an empty space over here. This would make a really great virtual golf kind of hangout bar club place. But you can definitely do some research and definitely check with your local libraries, because they can help you with this research. That's what we do. And kind of find what the gaps are, find where your market is, and also tell you how much competition there is. When I became a travel agent, I didn't realize how saturated the market was, especially in my area of travel advisors. And it was very different back then. And I just know, for me, I run my business, and I know not everybody's going to want to work with me, and that's fine, because there are plenty of other advisors for people to work with. Of course, I want all the business, and I want all the people to come work with me and be their travel advisor, but I know that's not reality. And I know that there are other advisors that work better with other people with different personalities, all of that stuff. So, I know that there's a really strong competition out there for travel advisors. But if you're just, if you're thinking about opening a dog spa, I know here in my town, there's just a luxury dog boarding place that's opening up. And there's other dog boarding places around, but they're not luxury per se. And so it's just kind of like, what is the market willing to bear in your area? Or if you want to do something online, say you want to open up a digital store, or you want to have courses online, or you want to do something else, that's completely different. But you still need to do your research and find out where that market is going to come from, where's that interest going to come from, who can you target, what are your demographics, what's your ideal avatar of the person that you're trying to connect with that you think will buy your product. All of those things are things to think about before diving in. So with that, once you kind of have your idea of what you want to do, at least the industry, it's best to write a business plan, at least an outline, if nothing else. And you can find a whole bunch of examples of this online for free. I also did not do this in my business when I first joined. I truly had no idea about even crafting a business plan, what that would even look like, what that would entail. And again, your local chambers of commerce can help with this. Again, the Small Business Administration, your local library, again, finding resources online. There are so many YouTube videos and other resources online, checking out books from the library about writing your business plans, other podcasts, all of that can really help you craft that business plan. And again, you're going to be looking at those demographics. You're going to be looking at that market research that you did, and kind of start to figure out what your niche is going to be, what your business is going to look like, where the money is going to come from, is, what kind of profit you're going to be looking at, all of those things that you need to be considering when starting up your business. And then once you have, I will also say many years later, so I started my business in 2014, and I actually wrote my first business plan in 2023, I think, was when I wrote my first actual business plan for my travel business. And it's really kind of enlightening because it makes you think about all the different aspects, not just your demographics and who you're trying to target, but it's looking at marketing, it's looking at your funding, it's looking at your education, like where have you educated yourself in the business, Have you been taking courses? Are you focusing on developing your skills, or are you focusing more on the sales? And are you looking to grow? Are you looking to franchise? Are you looking to do, scale your business in a certain way or by a certain date? And we will talk about scaling, we'll talk about franchising, all of those things in future episodes. So once you kind of have this business plan in place, and again, there's a million resources online to do that, you need to start thinking about funding your business. Now, when I started my travel agency, I still had a full-time job. So I was able to take money from my full-time job and pay for that initial contract that I signed with my host agency. And then from there, it really has been, the business has really only paid for itself. Meaning it's paid for my contract, it's paid for my technology, it's paid for my website and all of that stuff just in the past 3 years, because I really wasn't running my business like a business until 2022. So there are, again, so many resources out there on small business grants, and especially, again, if you're working with your small business administration or your small business development council that's close to you, there are a lot of opportunities out there now for small business funding to get you started and get you off the ground, whether that's a small business loan or it's maybe a grant or, some other funding that way that can come from a foundation, or maybe you partner with a nonprofit or something like that, someone that sees, or investors. That's a whole other part of this is where's that money going to come from? How much do you need to even just get started? What is all that going to look like, and looking at those finances. And we will also talk about bookkeeping and finances in a future episode as well, if not multiple episodes, because I know that's a huge one for all of us, is actually making money. And then once you've kind of figured out where your money is coming from, again, for me, my business was really not paying for it. So, it pretty much paid my contract and my website pretty consistently since 2014. But other than that, if I wanted to do anything above and beyond that, like say my professional development, like going to my annual conference in Anaheim, paying for that, paying for any fam trips or any other trainings or anything like that, that was all coming out of my funds from my other job. It really wasn't paying for all of that other stuff until much more recently. But that's the other things to look at. I'm a huge proponent of just continuing to educate yourself and joining in professional development of some kind in your industry, and that also costs money. I also, if you do want to, which is going to be a whole other topic, is looking for those, not only the professional development opportunities, but there's always scholarships for new professionals. Those have been in the industry for a very short amount of time. Or, when I first joined the library, I went to a 2-week training institute in California, and I got a scholarship to attend that because my institution was not going to pay for me to go. So I applied for a scholarship and thankfully got it. So I was able to go and do that early on in my career. So there are lots of opportunities like that as well. So once you kind of have your funding and kind of have maybe an ideal budget in place, you want to think about where your location is going to be. Are you going to have a storefront? Are you going to just be online? Are you going to work in, say, a co-working space? We have a couple co-working spaces here in my town that are pretty busy, pretty occupied most of the time. I know a lot of small businesses work out of my library and our libraries in our district, either in the study rooms or using the conference rooms for trainings and things like that, or presentations. So if you don't have a storefront, I don't have a storefront. I obviously work out of my home. And so I am 100% online. I will gladly meet with clients at coffee shop or at the library or somewhere to talk about their trip and talk about those kinds of things. But, we kind of just settle on a place to meet because I don't have an official office for them to come to. But of course, if you're looking for a business location, you want to have a storefront, you want to have a place for people to come meet. That's another thing where I know real estate is always hard to find, and it's always hard to find a good deal. And that's really where networking comes in, because you can start talking to real estate agents in your area, especially those that deal with commercial real estate, that can kind of keep their eye out for you. If you're like, hey, I'm looking for a space that's, this much square footage, maybe it's this much per month, these are the kinds of requirements I need. Like, I know for my friends that are massage therapists, obviously they don't want to be in a real estate office necessarily, but they might want to be, and say maybe they'll partner with a chiropractor or partner with a physical therapist or somebody that will rent a room to them or rent a space for them to come in and work out of. And I know there's several places, like when I was driving back from dinner tonight after my interruption, I noticed one of our local breweries. Above that is a hair salon, which I had never noticed before. And there's also a tattoo parlor, which I never even realized that there was really a second floor. I thought that was just more of like the brewery, but it's actually like office space. And I know too, like there's some photographers here in town that share studio space. You know, there's all kinds of ways if you're looking just to have a place for your stuff, or if you're looking at specific business locations, that's when you really want to start talking to the real estate agents in your area, because they know a lot and they know what's moving. They know what's popular, what's going to be, you know, they'll see the turnover. They'll see when a storefront opens up again because it's just not a good location or it's just not the right fit for whatever the business was. So that's when those networks kind of really come in handy for that. And then also you need to think about what your business structure is going to be. Is it just going to be you? Like for me, I'm an independent contractor. It is just me. I am my business structure. But, you know, if I were to bring on, say, a sub-agent, they would be another independent contractor, but they would be working for me, essentially. They would have nothing to do with my host agency, but I am very much responsible for them and responsible for all of the things that they do, the mistakes that they make. I am responsible for all of that stuff. Having extra insurance coverage for them as an employee of mine, all of those types of things are things to consider. And then also, you know, if it's not going to be just you, who's going to be in that structure with you, you know, whatever that looks like, or are you going to have, you know, a second in command? Are you going to have staff? What is the staffing structure going to look like? Are you going to have, you know, the managers, or is it just going to be like family? Are you actually going to hire people? All of those different things to think about in your business structure. So once you've kind of figured out what your, you know, who's going to, if you are going to have a business structure, who's going to do what, whose responsibilities are what, because that's definitely something that can get, you know, coming from obviously not a corporate background, but an organizational background where people's job descriptions can overlap, and that can cause a lot of just stress and arguments and all of those things. Kind of defining your job descriptions, defining who's responsible for what, all of those things are going to be part of that business structure and are very important to being successful, because nobody wants to just argue all the time while they're at work. And then you get to the fun stuff. One of the things is choosing your business name. Now, I was on a call earlier today with Royal Caribbean, and they were giving out prizes and things. And so they were listing, I did not win, by the way. But it's funny when you jump on these calls with agents from all over the country and you're hearing what everybody's business names are. Some of them are funny. Some of them are very formal. Like sometimes you can kind of tell by the business name what kind of agency they are. And especially if they're a franchise. Because when they're a franchise, it's funny, like half the time agents can only use the franchise name. Even if they have their own kind of business name under that, they can only use the franchise. And so, you know, that's kind of the thing that you need to think about too, like especially if you're joining a host agency, which again, we will talk about later, but how much freedom do you have with choosing your business name? That was honestly the funnest part about creating my business, was picking the business name. And it was very easy for me. My last name is North. It just made sense. I did do, this was way before the days of ChatGPT, but having kind of a business name generator online helping me kind of put words together, and it pretty quickly clicked that Traveling North just made the most sense for me. And of course, people get confused by it because they don't know that my last name is North when they meet me. And so they just think that I only do like Canada or like just cold destinations. And I'm like, no, it's just my last name. And it's funny too to talk to people now who have known me for a long time, and it's funny when they see it click finally that it's just my name. But choosing the business name, you really want to think about what your name is going to be. You obviously want to have, like, this is going to be your email address. It's going to be your website. It's going to be all of your social media handles, all of those things. And so you don't want it to be something that sounds like you were in an AOL group, you know, chat room in 1996. You know, you want something that represents your business, but also something that reflects who you are. Today, you know, I was hearing a lot of businesses that were like someone's initials, and it would be like the CN Travels or something like that. There's also like agents, friends of mine. I have a friend named Jolene, and hers is Journeys by Jolene, which I love. I think that one is so witty, and her logo is awesome too. But it's thinking about those things. You have to make sure that your business name is not already taken by somebody else. That was when I chose mine. There was already a Traveling North, or there was some other iteration of my name in Colorado, but it had expired, so I was able to register it under me, and I actually made my official business name is Traveling North Agency. But those are the things you need to look at online and see what names are already used, how they're already used. Even when creating a podcast, I had to make sure that the title wasn't already taken, the email wasn't already taken, all of those things. But you really want to make sure that it's something that is easy to spell, because that's how people are going to be finding you online. Even if they Google you, you want to make sure that you're being consistent in everything. I just stick with Traveling North because that's the easiest way to find me. But obviously, like, my website is travelingnorthagency.com. But if people just Google Traveling North, most likely they're going to find me. And so with the business names, again, it's like you're just looking to make sure that you can use it in all of its iterations, but also what is your website? What's your domain going to be? And if it's already used, how can you alter it to make sure that it's something like my website is travelingnorthagency.com because travelingnorth.com was already taken. And the same thing with like the social media and all of that stuff. For the most part, it's Traveling North Agency or Traveling North Agent online because Traveling North was already taken. And so the other thing too, it's funny, like today I was looking through a report, which I will talk about on a future episode about host agencies, but seeing someone's logo, and it was like instantly you could tell it was a luxury brand. And those are the other things too, is like when you're coming up with your business name, and we will do a whole episode on branding, if not multiple episodes on branding and marketing. But when you're choosing that business name, can you picture it in a logo? Can you picture, if you're going to have a physical storefront, can you picture what your sign's going to look like? Is that going to be easy to read? Is it going to be something that people can find easily if they're driving around looking for you, that kind of stuff? But yeah, the business name stuff is really, really fun. I had a really fun time coming up with mine, and then it was even more fun to pick out the logos and all of that stuff. The next step, once you have all of that in place, you definitely need to register your businesses where it's applicable, at the federal level, at your state level, even your city or town level, just depending on what you're selling, what your business actually is. Because if you have to collect local taxes or state taxes and all of that stuff, you need to get all of that in order as well. And then, of course, if you need to be trademarked, or if you're just going to be an LLC, a sole proprietor or whatever, talk with your advisors about what the best course of action would be for your business. That also means getting your federal and state tax IDs and an EIN. I did get an EIN with my business years ago when I first started, and I actually, just as a side note, so when I first started my business, my husband and I were living with my ex-in-laws. Obviously, they were my in-laws at the time, but everything was under their address for years and years and years, even after we'd gotten divorced and I had moved and all of that stuff, because I had taken a pause from my business. And so I had registered for an EIN back in 2014 and never got the paperwork for it. I think partially because we had moved and all of this stuff, but the EIN number was still good for me. So in 2022, when I needed it for something else that I was doing, I actually had to call into, I don't even know what agency does the EIN, but I did call into them and talk to them. And then they're like, well, you need to verify your address. And I was like, well, my address was not, my current address is not that address. I've gotten divorced since then and moved, and my name's changed and all of those things. And so I had to go back to I don't even remember. I think it was my first business card I found somewhere buried in a pile of papers somewhere, and it had that first address on it. So I was able to call and give that to them, and they were like, okay, that's fine. So then they updated everything, and it's all great. But that is also something to keep in mind, is when you move, or if you change your business address or any of that stuff, be sure to stay on top of that and make sure everybody else knows that you've moved or changed your address, just to remove the headaches later on in life. And then obviously you need to be applying for any licenses or permits that you may need. That is one thing with travel advisors, is that if you're going to be selling in Florida, or if you have clients that live in Florida, you definitely need to get I just got mine because I have to renew mine, the Sellers of Travel in Florida, which is a $50 fee every single year. You just submit that you're still an active travel advisor and they approve it. It's a very, very simple process, but that is one that if you are selling in Florida, or if you have people in Florida, that's what you need to apply for, that every single year. And thankfully, they will remind you of that. But there's a lot of things like that you just need to be mindful of when you're opening your business and running your business. So that's very much the kind of the boring side of all of this stuff, but it's also the most important, because you want to make sure that from the get-go you're doing everything legally and the way that it should be done, because it's really going to mess with you later if you don't have all of your ducks in the row from the very beginning. All right, and then finally, once you've applied for your licenses and your permits and you're all ready to go, you've got your storefront, you've got your website, you've got all of those things. The other most important thing is that if you are going to be making money, you need to open a business bank account. You for sure want to make sure that this is separate from your personal account. You should actually open up a couple different accounts under that business account. Definitely you want an account for saving for taxes. And I definitely, I have an account for taxes, I have an account for marketing, and I have an account for just my normal business checking account. But then I parse it out. So then you should also have one where you are basically paying yourself, because you should be making a profit as your own business owner. We will be talking to bookkeepers and accountants later on too. I'll give more tips about that. But definitely when you starting a business, you for sure want to keep your business account separate from your personal accounts. It just makes life so much easier. I will link to the business bank that I use myself. I use Bluevine. I've also had accounts with Relay, which is another great one for business owners. It helps kind of keep all of your accounts separate and running smoothly every time you get paid. And of course, the most fun is picking out your business name and your branding and all of that stuff. But the most important stuff is really knowing kind of what your demographics are and who's going to be interested in your business and who's going to be your customer, because that's, how you're going to grow. And especially if they have excellent experiences with you, or you provide excellent customer service, that's going to keep them coming back, and that's going to keep them wanting to share your information and tell everyone about you and send those referrals your way, which will continue to grow your business. So I will go ahead and link in the show notes the U.S. Small Business Administration 10 Steps to Start Your Business, which goes into much more detail than I did about all the different things you should be considering when you are starting your business. And then in future episodes, like I said, we're going to be talking about branding and marketing. We're going to be talking about host agencies. We're going to be talking about bookkeeping, websites, just marketing and networking and getting your name out there, and the customer experience and all of that stuff, because that's all very important, of course, to keep your business going and keep it successful. But really, you just need to have that structure ready to go beforehand. Okay, so my tip for this week is for those of you agents who are brand new, especially if you're just starting out and you're just getting into, you haven't figured out what your niche is, which we will talk about niches at a later date and all of that stuff, but really to start building up your portfolio of education and certifications. So of course, and we will do a whole other episode on actual certification, like the formal certifications and things like that. But for me, when I first started out, I knew I was going to be selling Disney. I knew I was going to be selling Universal. Those are some of the easiest trainings to get through, especially if that's kind of where your interest lies. Of course, if you're into ocean cruising, you want to start out with the brands that you know and love. All of those little trainings, some take a couple hours, some can take a while, but if they're done really well, they're enjoyable, you actually learn some stuff, you can find all of the resources that you can then use at a later time in your business just by doing all of those trainings. So definitely when you are starting out and you feel like you don't know anything, a great way to start is by looking up these trainings, like especially if your host agency has preferred suppliers. Those are the ones I definitely recommend starting with, because they probably already have a better partnership with them, so your commissions are going to be higher, but also their trainings are going to be much better and probably catered more to your business. And then it's just kind of a good way to start to figure out maybe what your niche is going to be, where your interest lies. Obviously, the requests you start getting from clients are going to help with that as well. It's always a good time during those downtimes to continue to educate yourself, especially if you get a certification like the CTA with the Travel Institute, or CLIA, or any of those where you have to have your continuing education. Starting with those courses is definitely a great way to continue to get educated, keep you on top of all of the new things, all of the new trends, new locations, new ships coming out, new ports, all of that stuff. That's all going to be in there. And then you can just keep those trainings up as you go. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love for you to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up next. You can also follow us along on social media, Life Between Flights Pod on both Facebook and Instagram. We also have a channel on YouTube. And if you want help planning your next adventure, please visit travelingnorthagency.com, where you can schedule a time to talk with me about any future travel plans. Of course, if you have any ideas or questions that you want me to cover, feel free to send them my way. You can always reach me at lifebetweenflightspod@gmail.com. Thanks for joining me today. Safe travels, and may your luggage follow you wherever you may go. Today's episode was sponsored by me, Traveling North, produced by me and edited by Nomad Creations. Please check out the show notes for referral links, discount codes, and more resources that I've talked about in this episode. Check us out on social media, including Life Between Flights Pod on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube. And if you have any questions, thoughts, comments about the show, please email me at lifebetweenflightspod@gmail.com.